Ah, Catan. A bountiful island just waiting to be explored and colonized by us. I mean, just think about it. To be the first person to step onto those shores and plant your flag. We're gonna build towns and cities, roads and armies, and there's no one around to tell us what to do. But I wonder if anyone ever stopped to ask the question, does Catan like being settled? What if it doesn't? What if, like so many places, there are native inhabitants already living here? And what if the island and those inhabitants are protected? My name is Shay Parker, and this is RTFM, the show where I teach you how to play a game, because I just don't know what else to do with my life at this point. And today, I'm not teaching you how to play Catan. I'm teaching you the opposite of Catan, where instead of playing as settlers colonizing a new land, you are playing as the island, using elemental powers, the indigenous people, and fear itself to tell these invaders to get the hell off of our land and go back where they came from. This is Spirit Island. Well, I mean, this is Catan. We're gonna be teaching Spirit. I'm gonna just put up the thing. In this game, you and your friends will take on the role of elemental spirits with wildly different playstyles and the best names I've ever seen in a board game. Each turn, you will grow in strength, gain energy, and select different power cards to play. Some will trigger immediately, but others will occur after the invaders have had a chance to explore, build, and ravage the land. You'll win the game if you can destroy enough of the invaders to scare them off, for which the threshold will change as the terror level rises. And you'll need to work together because each spirit has different strengths and weaknesses inherent in their abilities. This game is an excellent cooperative game and perfectly integrates theme and mechanics. And once you've conquered the base game, which I'll teach first, there are also plenty of additional modules that you can add to change things up, making this game different every time you play. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing to do is pick who you want to play. Each spirit has a different playstyle, so check the back of the spirit boards to see which one appeals to you. There's a bit of backstory, as well as setup instructions, a breakdown of their strengths and weaknesses, and a meter that gauges their complexity. For your first game, it's recommended that you play with one of the 4 low complexity spirits. So let's go with River, Surges, and Sunlight, and pick the blue tokens, because duh. Now, each spirit has a unique setup, so next we need to build the island. Let's say we're playing with 3 players, in which case the island will look like this, like an island. Each player will pick one of these sections to be their starting board and follow the setup instructions. In our case, we put 1 presence token on the highest numbered wetlands. Once you've done that, flip over your player board, place the rest of your presence tokens on these 2 tracks, and get your 4 starting power cards. I'll talk about these and everything else that this board is telling you as we go. First, we need to finish populating the island. As I mentioned before, this island has some native inhabitants, the Dahan, and wherever you see this symbol, place one of these mushroom-looking huts on the space. The island has also been colonized a little bit, so place towns and cities on the spaces matching their symbols. And lastly, there's blight, which represents damage to the island itself. And because nature can be a little self-destructive at times, you'll start the game with one of these blight tokens for each matching symbol. Blight is one of the main ways that you can lose this game, so let's head over to the Invader board to learn more about that. This board will tell you all about how you can win or lose the game, but first, let's set it all up. For each player, add 5 blight tokens. These may get added to your island as the game goes on, and like it says, if they all get placed, the game is lost. Next, we need to make the Invader deck. Take these small cards and randomly remove 1 from each of the 3 numbered stages. Then shuffle them individually, place them on the board with stage 1 at the top, reveal the first card, and place explorers on each land matching the card. In this case, they explore on all of the jungle spaces. Once you've done that, slide the card 1 space to the left. This track shows where the invaders will perform their 3 actions: ravage, build, and explore. And as you go through the deck, their actions will become stronger. If the deck ever runs out, then the invaders have fully colonized the island and the spirits lose, unable to keep up with the gentrification of their home. So, how do you win? Well, at the top of the invader board is the current terror level, and this gives you your win condition. At level 1, you need to destroy every single invader on the island. You can increase the terror level, and to do that, you need to earn fear cards, but I'll get to how those work a little bit later. Set up the fear deck by randomly taking 9 cards and placing terror levels 3 and 2 in between them as shown. Then place them on the victory space. And lastly, for each player, place 4 fear tokens at the top of this big mask here. And with that, we're ready to start playing. An interesting thing about Spirit Island is that it doesn't really have turns. There are different phases of the game, but within those, the players can go in order or do everything at the same time. It's up to you. So, during the Spirit phase, each player will do 3 things. First, your spirit will grow. At the top of your player board are a few options separated by thin lines. For the low complexity spirits, you'll pick 1 growth option each turn and do each of the actions within it. So let's go with the middle one. This lets us add 1 presence token to the board twice, both times with a range of 1. This means that the land we place our presence in can only be up to 1 space away from where we already have presence. Whenever you add presence, you take a token from the left of either the energy per turn track or the card plays track. The more tokens you remove, the stronger your spirit, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. We can daisy chain our presence like this if we want to, but we can also place 2 presence in 1 land, creating a spiritual site. Presence and spiritual sites will be important when we start using our power cards because they determine how much of the island we reach. And if we quickly look back at our player board, on the bottom we'll see our special rule, River's Domain, which states that our presence in wetlands counts as spiritual sites. So that's something we might want to aim for. For now, let's look at the other growth options. This one on the right lets you add 1 presence up to 2 spaces away and draw a power card. You'll start with 4 cards tailored to your strengths, but you will need to get new ones in order to diversify your abilities or double down on what you've already got going on. There are 2 types of powers, minor and major, and whenever you gain a power card, you can choose which one you'll get. No matter which one you pick though, you'll draw 4 cards from the deck and choose one of them to keep, discarding the rest. Major powers are stronger, but after you pick one, you'll have to forget one of the powers you have in your hand or discard pile, removing them from the game. So it's usually recommended to wait a little while before dipping into that pool. The last growth option for us would allow us to gain a power card, gain an energy, and reclaim your cards, meaning you take all the cards from your discard pile and put them back in your hand. Once you've grown, you'll get your allowance, which, since we put down that presence earlier, is now 2 energy per turn. And we'll be using that energy to play those power cards we've been talking about. Since we've uncovered a space on the card plays track, we can play up to 2 power cards this turn. And real quick, some spirits will have spaces like this, which allow you to reclaim 1 power card during the spirit phase. I'll get to how powers work a little bit later. For now, I just want to tell you about speed. Speed is a common street name for amphetamines, but in this game, speed refers to whether or not your power will go before or after the invaders. If it's a fast power, there will be a red bird, whereas slow powers will have a blue turtle. Regardless of how fast they are, you'll need to pay for the power as soon as you play it. So these 2 energy we got go right back to the bank. The energy bank. Church? Anyway, after each player has done all of these steps, it's time to move on to the Invader phase. Okay, technically, before the Invader phase happens, all the fast powers that were played activate. But because powers will make a lot more sense once we've talked about how the enemy works, let's just move on to the next bit. So, during the Invader phase, a few things will happen, and they're all listed right here on the Invader board. If you're playing with Blighted Island cards, their effects will trigger first. I'll talk about those in a minute. Then any fear cards you've earned are revealed and their effects occur. I'll also talk about those in a minute. After that, we move on to the Invader actions, Ravage, Build, and Explore, which trigger in that order. For the first turn, the invaders won't be able to ravage because there's no card there, but they will get to build on jungles. During the build action, check each space matching the card shown. If there are any invaders in the space, they're going to build something. If there are more towns than cities already, build a city. Otherwise, build a town. Then we move on to Exploration. Draw a new card from the Invader deck and place Explorers on each matching space. However, there is a caveat here. If there are no invaders in or adjacent to a matching land, and that land is not next to the ocean, don't place an Explorer there. That means that if you do a good job clearing out the center of the island, it'll be easier to protect from further expansion. After Exploration, slide all the cards down 1 space to the left, after which we would move on to the slow powers and start all over again, but let's fast forward to the next Invader phase so we can talk about Ravaging. See, the invaders don't care about your island. They cut down the trees, they strip mine the resources, and they throw their empty beer cans into to-go containers wherever they feel like it. This has a negative effect on the land and the Dahan. When Ravage comes up, each invader on a matching space will attack. Explorers do 1 damage, towns do 2, and cities do 3. They also have 1, 2, and 3 hit points respectively. If 2 or more damage are dealt by the invaders, the land will be blighted. Take a blight token from the invader board and place it on the land. If any spirits have presence on that land, 1 token from each player will be destroyed, and you won't get that presence back, so be careful. Also, if there is already a blight token on that space, the blight cascades, meaning you add another token to an adjacent space of your choice. This second token will also destroy presence and can itself cascade, so be careful. Also, if any spirit loses all of the presence they had on the board, you'll lose the game, so be careful. Now, the damage invaders deal also hurts the Dahan, which have 2 hit points each. Damage is dealt efficiently, so in this case, where the invaders would deal 3 damage, 1 Dahan would die and 1 would be hurt. The Dahan are a peaceful people, but after being attacked, they will fight back. So any surviving Dahan will deal 2 damage each. In our example here, that's 4 damage, enough to destroy the explorer and the town. But if there were more enemies, you would get to choose how the damage is distributed. Like we did with the Dahan, flip buildings over if they take partial damage but are not destroyed. Whenever buildings are destroyed, that will generate fear. A destroyed town will get you 1 fear, and a city gets you 2. Killing explorers apparently isn't a big deal though, because that doesn't get you any. I guess these colonizers care more about their property than the people inside of them. Whenever a game effect earns you fear, you'll slide a fear token into the mouth of this mask. Once all the fear tokens slide down, you've earned a fear card. Draw the top one from the deck and put it face down, revealing it at the beginning of the Invader Phase. These cards have different effects based on the current terror level. As more cards are earned, the terror level increases, bringing the strength of the fear cards up, as well as reducing the victory requirements. At terror level 1, you need to destroy all invaders. At 2, you just need to destroy all buildings. 3, it's just all cities, and if you get to terror level 4, the invaders pee their pants all the way home and you automatically win the game. So, now that we've learned how the invaders can and will try to ruin our day, let's see if we can't mess them up a little in return. Alright, let's get into the spice of this game, the real meat of this strategy. I'm hungry, apparently, but we've got a job to do, and that job is clearing up this island. The powers that you'll have at your disposal can do a myriad of things, affecting the invaders, the Dahan, the land itself, and even you or other spirits. They all have a few things in common though, so let's take a look. First off, each power has the cost at the top left. After choosing your powers during the spirit phase, you'll pay the cost in energy. Then, as I mentioned before, the fast powers will activate before the invaders and the slow powers will go after. Fast powers are clearly useful, but slow powers can be very strong as well. They just require a little more planning. Next, you'll want to look at the range and target of your power. As with adding presence, most powers will have an arrow and a number, showing how far away from any land with presence you can target. Some powers will require you to trace your range from a spiritual site, which limits your options a bit until you get more presence on the board. The target of most powers will be any, which means you can target any space within range, but some will have requirements like a land type or the existence or non-existence of invaders, Dahan, or blight in that space. Occasionally, you'll come across a power that targets players, and these will have no range because instead of affecting the land, you're affecting a spirit. So what do the powers do? Lots of things. Damage is pretty self-explanatory. We already talked about how the invaders have hit points and what happens when you destroy them. As with Dahan, you can choose how the damage is spread out within the space, which can be useful for some spirits. Some powers will also allow you to destroy invaders outright or replace them with something. Destroying buildings will generate fear, but removing or replacing them doesn't, so keep that in mind. Speaking of violence, you can also defend a space from the invaders. A defense power will subtract the number on the card from the damage dealt to the land and Dahan during Ravage. And what's important to note is that even if the invaders don't deal damage to the Dahan, as long as they're attacking, the Dahan will still fight back. Pushing and gathering are another common set of abilities. Pushing something moves it from the land you're targeting to any adjacent space, and if you push multiple things, you can push them into different spaces. Gathering is the same thing, but in reverse. Target a space and pull adjacent things into it. And with River's Bounty here, we add another Dahan because they're growing more mushrooms. A power might also have you removing blight from the board. When this happens, put the blight token back on the invader board with the other tokens. Some powers will earn you fear without even hurting anybody, so that's neat, or terrifying, depending on your perspective. And lastly, a power might allow you to repeat a power card. You don't have to pay for the power again, but you do get to perform every action on the card a second time. Now, you've probably noticed these symbols along the left side of the power cards. These are elements, and they're used for two different things. Mostly, they fuel your innate powers. These are listed on your spirit board and are unique abilities that you can perform if you gain enough elements in a turn. Our massive floods require at least 1 light and 2 water. So if we play both River's Bounty and Flash Floods, we'll have more than enough. The extra light won't stick around though, so it might be worth it to play your cards efficiently to get the most use out of them. As you can see, the ability gets stronger the more elements you play, but you'll need to upgrade your spirit if you want to be able to play enough cards to even reach those high-level abilities. Some spirits will make this easier by having permanent elements that you can unlock in your energy tracks. And if you have multiple innate powers, the same elements can fuel both of them. You don't spend them on one or the other. The second thing that elements can do is augment certain powers. If you have the elements needed, the bottom half of the power unlocks, usually making it considerably stronger. Elements are definitely something to keep in mind when choosing new powers, and it should be worth noting that you don't have to use a power that you've paid for. Sometimes powers come with negative effects, or a powerful fear card might make a power you've played unnecessary. Even if you don't use the power, you still gain the elements. And if this is your first time playing, that's all you need to know to get started. You can now play the base game no problem. However, if you're looking for a challenge or just want to mix things up, Spirit Island comes with some additional modules that are worth adding. Okay, so you've got the base game down and you're ready to dial things up a notch. That's where the modules come in. Each will provide a different playstyle and you can mix and match as much as you want. Let's start easy and work our way up. First is scoring. Now, Spirit Island is cooperative, but if you want to keep track of how well your team does, you can calculate your score at the end of the game. You'll earn points for winning quickly, or losing, but lasting a long time, as well as extra points for increased difficulty and keeping Dahan alive. But you'll lose points for each blight left on the island. Next is the thematic board. This doesn't change the gameplay that much, but if you flip the tiles over, there's a version of the island where land types are grouped together in a way that makes more sense for an actual island. You also set up the island a little differently for 2 and 3 players, and there are a few other differences in setup that are shown on the boards themselves. This way of playing is less mechanically balanced, but more thematically appropriate. And now we have the first real change in gameplay, the Blighted Island cards. The base game comes with 2, and they're both pretty rough, so randomly pick one and place it with the healthy island face up on the invader board. The way these work is, instead of placing 5 blight per player on the space, you only place 2 per player. Then, if all of the blight gets removed, you flip the card over, and now the island is blighted. Place more blight tokens on the card based on what it says, and then every invader phase, the blighted island effect will take place. This is a permanent change, so even if you put more blight back on a card, the island will never be healthy again. Up next is scenarios. During setup, you can choose to play a scenario, which will change certain aspects of the game. These might have different win or lose conditions, additional setup details, or whole new mechanics to work with. Whatever it does, the specifics will be listed on the card. And last up are adversaries. If the invaders are a little too vanilla on their own, you can give them an identity from such well-known colonizing forces as England, Sweden, and Brandenburg, Prussia. These can change the game as well as crank up the difficulty, but you get to decide by how much. Each adversary has a level tracker, and at the beginning of the game, you can choose how high you want to go on that. Each level will add a new element, as well as alter how many fear cards you add to the deck, making victories through fear that much harder. No matter how strong you make them though, each adversary will have an ability called Stage 2 Escalation. Looking back at the Invader cards, you'll notice that the only difference between Stage 1 and Stage 2, besides the addition of this Coastal Lands card, is the castle symbol. This refers to the escalation unique to each adversary and will be triggered as soon as the card is revealed. For BP over here, that means that on each board with towns or cities, add 1 town to a land without one, which means that during Stage 2, you're going to have a lot more work to do keeping these buildings under control. Those are all the modules for the base game, but this hasn't taken too long, so let's take a quick look at the expansion, Branch and Claw. This adds a couple of new spirits, a lot of powers, several new Blighted Island cards, scenarios, and France. But what really makes it interesting are 2 new additions. Event cards and these tokens representing unpassable wilds, vicious beasts, debilitating disease, and unavoidable strife. If a wild's token is placed on the board, the next time an invader would explore in that land, the token is removed instead and the invader goes back to the supply. Disease does the exact same thing, but for buildings. And Strife works similarly for Ravaging, but instead of being placed on a land, Strife tokens are placed beneath specific invaders, blocking the next damage they deal before being removed. Lastly, beasts don't do anything on their own, but they can be activated by certain powers or other gameplay effects, especially event cards. During setup, add 1 beast and 1 disease per board. The beast goes on the highest numbered space with no printed setup instructions, and the disease will go on land number 2, the one with the city. Event cards are nice and easy for the most part. During the Invader phase, after Blighted Island effects, but before fear cards are played, draw 1 event card and read it aloud. The first part will either give the spirits a choice, or it will have an effect based on the current terror level, health of the island, or invader stage. Occasionally, the choices will require the spirits to pay a cost in energy. You can pull your resources for this unless it says otherwise, and sometimes this cost may be aided by a particular element. If so, first count 1 energy towards the cost for each of that element in play. Then, any player can discard cards with that element from their hand to count 2 energy each, or they can forget cards from their hand, discard pile, or even in play to count 4 energy each. After that will be 1 or 2 more effects, usually dealing with beasts and the Dahan, but I'll let you discover those on your own. And that's how you play Spirit Island. All of it. For now. They just had a big Kickstarter for an expansion, might change things up. I'm very excited. In the meantime, I'll be releasing some extra videos in the coming weeks, and if you're a Patreon backer, you'll get access to my exclusive strategy video. Speaking of, my army of rules lawyers have voted on the next game I teach, and it's gonna be Root! The woodland game of might and right that is so very hot right now. If you want to vote on what I teach next, as well as get access to other exclusives like those strategy videos or the Twilight Imperium epilogues I wrote, head on over to my Patreon and consider donating a few bucks. It'd be cool of you. Till next time.